Hi guys, thank you for joining us today as we discuss the evolution of modern accounting, and more specifically, the evolution of QuickBooks. Now, recently, while writing an article talking about the evolution of QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Online Advanced, I started to do a little bit more research into the relationship between desktop and enterprise, as well as online to advanced. Before we dive into that, real quickly, let me introduce myself. My name is Matthew Fulton. I'm with Parkway Business Solutions. We provide bookkeeping and payroll services to small and medium-sized businesses, as well as workflow design and process automation. Additionally, I'm the co-creator of a Facebook group called QB Community Live with my cohort, Linda Artisanti. It's a great group filled with accountants, bookkeepers, small business owners. It's a great resource that if you have questions, whether it's about the program or business itself, please feel free to join, ask, and we all try to do the best we can to help each other. It's all fundamentally based on the idea of together we all succeed. So during today's agenda, we're going to cover the following topics. Again, the idea of the evolution of QuickBooks, the modern accounting system. We're going to talk a little bit more about growing businesses and the mid-market opportunity, some of the numbers that we've learned from that. And then I really want to deep dive into some of the newer features offered by QuickBooks Online Advanced. Of course, at the end, we'll leave some extra time that we love to gain questions from people and see how we can answer those for you as well. So getting started here, the evolution of modern accounting. When I started to do my research trying to understand the differences or what was the difference between QuickBooks Online versus Advanced, it made me dive back a little bit further and started to look into like the history of Intuit. Now, the funny thing is, if you really look back, you'll find that all the way back in 1992, we had this QuickBooks DOS that actually progressed over time, and we ended up having, once QuickBooks itself was rather well stationed, it grew into QuickBooks, or they evolved it into QuickBooks Enterprise. What I found was this was their first attempt to truly go into a mid-market environment, and they did it with specific features which actually parallel the same concept of QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Online Plus. Those features would be the additional custom fields, advanced reporting, of course, and the custom user permissions or advanced user permissions. There, of course, were additional features as well, but those are the three primary ones that really stood out to me, of course. If one was to reflect on the history of modern accounting industry, they might be surprised to see how far the industry has actually come in such a short period of time. Prior to the introduction of computerized accounting, mid-market businesses often required multiple staff members to handle the very manual processes, often making it very expensive to generate advanced reporting. A recent study conducted by the National Center for the Middle Market found that the strongest growth, 8.7%, actually happened within the middle market, which surpassed all other categories, being small business and larger. Within this sector, the three fastest categories that were experiencing this growth were actually the professional services, healthcare services, and the construction industry. Throughout the entire market itself, 74% of companies reported year-over-year growth. More importantly, 51% of the companies also stated they had actually added to their headcount. One of the most interesting facts that I found was one, as you're seeing here, that companies who executives considered analytics to be extremely important were 25% more likely to have achieved double-digit growth last year than the average. Now, that's really important because one of the most fundamental benefits of increasing from QuickBooks Online to Advanced is the advanced reporting. It's using the custom fields to get better data. It's using Fathom Reporting to get the visual image of what's going on with your company, the key performance indicators. With that in mind, let's talk about the new features of QuickBooks Online Advanced. I always like to lead with custom fields because, well, they're my favorite. The custom fields are available in 4 different types. You're going to have your traditional text field, which has been around for quite some time, your number field, which will give you the ability to do numbers 0 through 9, and a decimal, but only one, a date field, so you can select a date from a pop-up calendar, and then, of course, my favorite one, the drop-down field. Now, the drop-down field by far is the most powerful addition, I think, to date when it comes to QuickBooks Online Advanced. A couple examples of how we've used it actually would be, well, it would be like the realtors in the mortgage industry. So we have a client of ours that's in the mortgage industry, and he had joined in to a government-based program where he needed to report the type of loans that were being offered, as well as the initial appraisal amount. Previously, what they would have to do is keep track of all this information in a separate Excel sheet and update it as often as they could, then create the calculations before they could fill out their forms. When we first established their workflow, it was prior to the introduction of QuickBooks Online Advanced, so we were forced to use the text field to try to capture that information. And while it did do a decent job, when it came to information about like the type of loan that was being offered, first-time home buyer, the initials that were being used were easily mistyped, whether it's a capital versus lowercase, and caused us to spend multiple hours doing cleanup of the data before we could actually get reasonably useful information out of it. Thanks to QuickBooks Online Advanced, we're actually able to set, like through the drop-downs, specific static answers so the person doing the data entry at that time could choose from that instead of just manually typing in any wildcard that they wanted to, basically. Same thing actually could be done for any type of a business that has multiple salespeople. If they're looking to track the sales totals by person, and more importantly, even the commissions that would be owed to them. By setting up a custom drop-down field, you could have it where you can select the sales rep, and then you can generate reports that could be automatically emailed out to each individual rep for them to use to calculate their own commissions. We found this saved both the company and the salespeople time, which of course equals to money. Accelerated invoicing is one that at first I didn't quite appreciate it as much as I should have. It is a phenomenal feature, especially if you take into consideration industry types such as property management, where maybe they have late fees. I know if I pay my rent late, they will hit me with a $75 charge after the third day. Well, if you're a property management, you have hundreds of different properties out there. Going in and creating each individual late fee invoice can take a lot of time. So through QuickBooks Online Advanced, you can now utilize their accelerated invoicing function to create a single invoice, as we're showing in the example here with a single line item, but then select it and add on all the different client names that you want to duplicate the invoice for. So by doing that, it's literally going to take and generate their new invoices for each and every one of them all at the same time. With the proper information, email, everything else, you can even have it automatically sent out. But additionally, you can even actually create more complex invoices with multiple line items and then still duplicate that also. Additionally, though, they've also made it possible to do CSV import functionality. Now, CSV import functionality is going to be great if you're using some kind of a third-party application for a point of sale where you need to gather the details from that and you want to pull it in. Previously, we always focused on using like what they would call a zero balance sales receipt, where you break out all of your materials, your labor, whatever your different income categories would be on a single sales invoice, and then also attribute the payments to the type of payment that was received. So you create an item for credit cards, one for checks, and so forth. So when it's all done, it comes back down to zero. Now, the difficulty of doing that is if you're trying to use that financial dashboard inside of QuickBooks Online, it's not actually going to show you your total sales there because you will have brought it up and then brought it back down. Fundamentally, your financial reporting is correct, but you're not seeing this other information. By using the CSV import, it now gives you the ability to pull important data in for using the metrics, especially with like Fathom Reporting, by pulling in the information, figuring out what your average cost per customer is, instead of having to do some of your analytics from that program over there in comparison to this one over here. So if you can import the data and it's more efficient and more timely, it's a win-win for everybody on that side. Again, examples of industries where this is very powerful, either one of them. Service-based companies is one that comes to mind right away. It's a landscape company. If you have a landscape company that has they're charging you the same price, or all clients, they're going to come twice a month, so it's going to be $60 or $100, whatever you're paying, but it's the same thing for multiple people. Imagine if you could just generate one invoice and then quickly click off the names of the people that need to be billed. The argument against this would be utilizing possibly like recurring invoices or recurring transactions inside of QuickBooks Online, and that is a feature that you could use. However, if you're adding on a lot of new clients every week, that means you're going in and you're actually creating each and every single one of those, have to schedule it up, set it up to automatically send out as well. So it may be a situation that doing it this way, where it's just quickly clicking the names and generating all at once, gives you more control right at the time of invoicing to make sure you're only invoicing for what you should. User permissions. So user permissions is an area. My favorite functionality of user permissions, or in other words, the ability to do real granular access capabilities, probably has to do with the banking area. For the longest time, if we provided access to any of our clients' employees into the banking area, that means they got to see everything. They could go into the general ledger, they could take a look and be able to very quickly see exactly how much money was being earned, even by fellow employees possibly, as well as just the bank account balances of the company, which is not a good thing. Now, by having the ability to only provide access to the bank deposits, we have the ability as accountants to empower one of our clients' employees to help us put together the deposit details that we need. Since we're not there, we're not familiar whether they are taking 3 or 4, maybe 5 checks from different customers, combining them together on a single deposit receipt, and then doing that deposit. Since the introduction of bank feeds, our goal is to try to match everything to bank feeds as much as possible, but that's really hard to do if we can't be there when they're putting that slip together. So having somebody internally that can help do that definitely expedites the process, helps us as accountants get our job done more efficiently, and provides the owners access to better information quicker. Additionally, you do now have the ability that you can do even more separation for your sales as well as your expense side. So on the sales side, you can provide granular access to where one person could create an estimate, but they can't create an invoice. It would require a second person to turn that estimate into an invoice, or maybe a manager's approval from that aspect. It's great for compliance to make sure that you don't have somebody that's just invoicing for stuff that they shouldn't be, or even on the expense side, purchasing things that are not approved. Of course, as you had before, you can set up where you can do report-only access as well, but now you can do a little bit better detail of reports on sales and customers only versus expenses and vendors. And the great example of that is you have a sales team. Sure, you want them to see how their numbers are, but you don't need them to know what the expenses on the flip side of the business are necessarily. Keep them focused on what's important. We already gave kind of an example of the payments with checks, of course. So any industry where if it's a very if you're receiving a lot of check payments, this is a great use for that because it can really help you fine-tune those deposit details. Now, Priority Circle was one that I wasn't familiar with, so I decided to give it test it out. The way I did it was inside of my company file, I literally clicked on the button, and I called in just to try to talk to who my rep was to see if they were available, if they were not. And I did have the opportunity to leave a message for my representative, and I wanted to see how long would it take for them to get back to me. I was really impressed when I actually had a return phone call within about 2.5, maybe 3 minutes. More importantly, I personally prefer to talk on the phone. I know it's a little strange, call me old school. A lot of other people may prefer to do it by email or through text. With Priority Circle, you have the ability to choose your preferred method of communication. You can even schedule up an appointment for them to do a return phone call. Since we're all so busy, we're trying to really, section off sections of our day. Additionally, you also have the ability to provide training for your clients. So you can register them into classes. So if you have one of those clients that's they're just not getting it when it comes to how to use the program, maybe get them set up with some courses, and you guys can succeed together. Now, my second favorite one, of course, would have to be smart reporting with Fathom. I must confess, at this time, I am still diving into Fathom and what it can do. It's a pretty powerful tool that allows you to explore industry-specific key performance indicators. It gives you some very decent cash flow projections, but it also allows you to fully import your own data sets that you can do comparisons against. So as an example, and we've got a little bit of a video running here just to kind of go through some of the features and what you can look at. But imagine if you were to go to, say, for a retail business or e-commerce business, and you pulled up all of your Google Analytics reporting, use that to compare against your sales for a period of time. If you were running a specific sale and you had kicked up your AdWords spending, you'd want to know if that actually generated additional sales or not. So thanks to Fathom, you have the ability, you can import that data and you can start to actually make those kind of reports up. As you're seeing on the screen at the moment, what's happening is it's going through and I'm looking at the different key performance indicators. And to test this out, we actually asked a couple of our clients to make a comparison. We pulled out a just standard profit and loss and said, what does this mean to you? Had them take a look at it, and almost every one of them went straight to the bottom and be like, well, what do you mean? Looks like I didn't make any money. When we did the same exact test with Fathom, in the prior report we had the arrows up and down, everything else, what happened was pretty impressive. All of a sudden, the client started to ask us questions. They wanted to understand why the arrows were going up, why the arrows were going down, and we increased the engagement. Fundamentally, as accountants trying to connect with our clients, that is the goal. That's the winning recipe. So we immediately saw that we were able to increase client engagement by providing a visual representation of what was going on in their company in a way that they could digest easily. Now, the report on the screen right now, the cash flow forecasting, it's one of my favorite out of Fathom. It's going to actually give you, again, that visual representation of what your total revenues are. It's going to show you your costs, your expenses, because we all probably get the exact same question of, I'm making all these sales, but I don't seem to have any money. Well, that's going to help you be able to try to evaluate and discuss it. And truly for accountants, it's going to help us set up for better advisory services. I will say that this growth map that we have here, I don't have a clue how it's supposed to work. So hopefully you can come back to me and tell me a little bit more about it. I prefer to focus more on like the trend reports that we have here. You can choose the different accounts you want to set up your trending by. And the next report, the next section that comes up is even more impressive, where it's your goal seeking. And you can start to play with ideas of, if you were to adjust maybe what your price was a little bit, what would it look like? How about if you were to reduce your variable cost of services a little bit? And you start to see what it does to your overall goal of increasing your profitability ratio. You can even change that ratio as well. I have a strong feeling that a lot of people will probably get lost into this, having fun with it. So definitely enjoy it. Now, investment properties traditionally have to have a separate LLC for every property they're working on to keep them separate in case of a concern about liability. What that usually means, though, is you probably have to roll those up into a single tax projection or tax reporting packet to really be able to finish the year out. So Fathom allows you to take these different properties, you can roll it up into a single report, but now literally they just add the ability where you can do comparables against each other as well to see how different ones are working. And actually that comparables is best used for something like franchise owners. For franchise owners, if you have multiple locations, maybe you want to see how location A versus B and C are doing and find out what's making one successful versus another. Those automotive dealers goes back to the idea again of the Google Analytics. If you've got an automotive dealer, they're spending a whole bunch of money advertising on Craigslist, the Penny Saver, the Trade Express, and all these different websites, right? They need to get the picture of the car out there. Well, you want to be able to track and see your spend on those things in comparison to your total sales. So that's an area where you could do some custom reporting and really have some extra benefit off of it. So that was a pretty quick dive through some of the more fundamental keys of QuickBooks Online Advanced. But I also wanted to talk to you about a specific use case that we were able to set up. In our use case, it was a software development house. And as I like to call it, the project variables, basically the company hires subcontractors across, I think it's like 6 different countries. The recruiters of those contractors, the developers, are also paid commission on the hours the developers work for a given period of time. Now, of course, not all hours are billable, but all must be accounted for. And the company has multiple sales associates, and they want to be able to track the sales by not only the associate, by the regions, or otherwise known as like the country manager. So to accomplish this, to try to get the financials, prior to us taking the company on, they had, I believe it was 2 different internal people working to do the data entry from all of the billable time. This specific company had developed their own time tracking application. So we were not able to use something like a T-Sheets, and instead had to pull the information that was being extracted from that and get it into QuickBooks Online. And it was a very manual process. We were able to expedite that the process, help import the data quicker, but and save time, but we still were running into some difficulties trying to really track the sales associates and everything else. So when we were able to step them up to QuickBooks Online Advanced, we took advantage of a couple things: the custom fields, the user permissions, and the reporting, of course. So with the custom fields, as you can kind of see on the screen there, we set up a specific customer type. The customer type allowed us to know when our billing cycle was. So whether it was a pay-as-you-go versus maybe like a project billing, we could very quickly sort our list of customers and kind of section them off to do our invoicing. But we also had the ability, as you can see, to add on a sales rep and a country manager. Now those fields become very powerful when you start to pull up different reports within QuickBooks Online. And through that, again, we're able to utilize it to help expedite the commission structure onto it all. When it came to user permissions, this was a great example because they had so many different people paying different ways through Veeam, through PayPal, so forth. We could provide access to the deposit detail, but not everything else necessarily. And they would help us break out that $2,500 deposit into the 5 different companies that had paid it, as well as separating out maybe the merchant processing fees. And then finally, the Fathom Reporting, what that did for us was, by utilizing the Fathom Reporting, the company actually had multiple founders. There's actually 4 different founders, and they each needed different aspects of reporting to satisfy their questions. For example, the sales manager was very focused on the actual sales of his team, whether it was the sales had been increasing or not, but maybe not as much about the gross profitability of those sales. The operations manager wanted to see that, so we could create custom reporting packets for each one and give them the information they needed to make them satisfied. So all in all, this client has become one of our favorite clients, our top billing clients, and now they have the information they need to be able to make decisions. We're actually working with them currently on doing a whole new pricing model for the way they do their developers, pay their developers. And really, it's more about forecasting and, again, getting into those advisory services. If it wasn't for QuickBooks Online Advanced, I feel it would have taken a much longer time for us to reach this level with the company. So I hope this quick demonstration of QuickBooks Online Advanced, some of the features, some of the use cases we've had for it has been helpful. However, I'm always open to questions and always welcome a phone call. Again, I love the phone calls versus emails, but any method of communication is great. Please feel free to reach out. If you're looking for additional information, again, our Facebook group is QB Community Live. Feel free to join in. Let us know that you saw this webinar. You can find us on pretty much all social media. Business-wise, the tag is Parkway Inc. That's PARKWAYINC. But with the nickname Spot, you can also find me under Spoticus. That's SPOTYCUS. Again, we're firm believers on the concept of together we all succeed. So on that, here's wishing you all a very successful week.